Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Persado and Forrester webinar, What's Next for Email Marketing in 2019. My name is Dan Gingiss. I'm a VP of Content Marketing for Persado, and I'll be your moderator today. And I'm very excited to introduce two great speakers for you today. The first is going to be Vice President and Principal Analyst for Forrester, Shar Van Bosker, who is one of the industry leaders and experts in email marketing. And then Persado's own email expert, Kat Dessenon, who is the VP of Campaign Management. We're going to start with Shar from Forrester. We're then going to hand it off to Kat from Persado, and we're going to have time at the end for a Q&A. So if at any point during the webinar you'd like to ask a question, please go to the participant feedback box and enter your question there, and we'll be happy to address it at the end of the webinar. Again, we really appreciate you attending today, and I'd like to hand it off to Shar Van Bosker.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Dan, and thank you to Persado for inviting me to join today. This is a great topic and I think a timely one because I bet many of you are in the process of doing a lot of 2019 planning right now. I know I'm just wrapping up some of the forecast work that we do sizing spend on email and other digital marketing channels, trying to get those numbers out so people can think about them as they put their 2019 plans together. So very timely. The story I'm going to tell is definitely a what's next for email, as we think just a little bit about a very veteran channel that has been used in many cases in the exact same way for its entire lifespan, for its entire tenure. And I want to just present some potential ideas that will help you think differently about email and perhaps some of the partnerships that you have in place with vendors like Persado. So I want to start with a little bit of a shock point, which is that every year, Forrester does a review of email marketing programs against a review methodology that we've developed to assess the user experience of email programs. So we're sort of assessing, if we were the customer receiving your email, how did the email land on us? Does it contribute a value to us? Is it a reasonably easy thing for us to use to get to that value? Do we trust you as a sender? And is the program itself something that we can easily register to take advantage of? And we put about 100 different emails through this review methodology to see how good are companies at accomplishing the user needs from an email objective point of view. And consistently, we've been doing this same basic set of reviews for almost 15 years. And consistently we find that most email marketing programs fail our review. Now a little bit of insight into what you're looking at here and what these numbers represent. The review methodology asks about 20 questions, and each question is scored on a -2 to a +2 scale. So a -2 is a strong fail and a +2 is a strong pass. So this helps you understand why the concentration of scores is really between 0 and about 10. This indicates that for many companies, they might be doing some things very well, but they're doing some things poorly enough that the poor things are canceling out their good scores. A positive 10 would be a passing score. So I mention this because as I think about the years that I've studied email and this question of why are we sort of stuck in accepting email programs that are a little bit lackluster or never seem to fully blow our customers' expectations out of the water, I come back to a couple of different things. One is this notion that consistently we find there's lots of improvement to be had in the email programs that we take a look at. The second thing is that for the most part, overall attitudes toward email have also stayed fairly consistent year on year. So Forrester runs a consumer data panel where we ask consumers to tell us about the way they use technology, their lifestyle habits, the things that they value, the technologies that they use, the sort of habits and family routine that they run through. And we ask them consistently some questions about how they leverage email, how they leverage email promotions, and the kinds of email communications that they value. Now, I've been tracking this data since 2004, but I just included the last 6 years or so of data to give you a little bit of a historical perspective. And there is a bit of improvement in terms of fewer people tell us they're deleting emails over time. But for the most part, the overall attitudes toward email have stayed very consistent from 2012 through today in terms of the concentration of people who value email marketing and are buying things advertised through email. So even if we can identify here some small improvements in attitudes toward email, maybe as marketers have gotten better at creating more relevance, it feels to me like we're not seeing leaps ahead for a medium that has had 20 years of potential development associated with it. We think about some of the media that we do today that has a much sexier connotation with it than email does. So why is it that we accept email's poor performance? Why are we fine to just continue to believe that email is good enough? And what I want to challenge us to think about together in our time this morning is what could we be doing differently with email that might help improve our overall email marketing program performance, but maybe also use email in a way that helps us create better and deeper relationships with our customers. Instead of just continuing the programs that we've had in place for years and more or less trying to think about how do we eke out a percentage point improvement on our click-through rate. So let me give you a theme to think about as we go through our program today, which is that I believe email marketing can be a wedge in a way that's focusing on helping you better understand your customers and better connect with them across their life cycle. So let's talk first of all about this notion of customer obsession. If you have had many conversations with Forrester over the course of the last 18 months, you've probably heard us talk about this idea of customer obsession. It is our notion for what businesses need to do to compete in an era of extremely entitled customers. You have experienced in your own work the demands of customers and the expectations that they have to receive information, content, products, services, brand experiences in context and at their moment of need. These customers also tend to have very limited attention spans and are very willing to jump ship or move to a new trusted set of brand partners if their expectations from their existing set aren't met. So our definition of customer obsession is to put the customer at the center of your total operating model. This means that you are using customer insights to determine the answer to every business question that you might ask. Where should we open a new branch or store? What person should we hire for this open headcount? What technology should we build or buy? What are the ways that we should measure our existing performance? All of the answers to these questions should start with an understanding of who your customers are and what they need. Now let me give you just a little bit of some more granular description of what customer-obsessed companies look like and how they behave. And I'm going to set this up in a little bit of a from and to construct. So you can think a little bit about maybe what you're doing today and how an evolution to customer obsession might change some of the work that you have underway today. So the first characteristic of a customer-obsessed company is that they are customer-led. They are not just customer-aware. And this point, I think, is a profound one for marketers because we have all spent a lot of time identifying our target market. This is what a customer-aware company does. They think about who should we target. But a customer-led firm thinks not just about general demographics, but thinks about Who are our customers? Why do they do what they do? What are their motivations? And how can we use that understanding to guide our overall business strategy? This is not just about sending good communications to our target customer. This is about using customer motivations to direct business strategy. The second characteristic of a customer-obsessed firm is that they are insights-driven. They are not just data-rich. Now this one is probably an easy one for you to get your hands around because I don't know anybody who feels like they don't have enough data. The problem is not assembling quantities of data. The problem is getting enough information from that data to be able to be customer-led. And maybe also making sure that the right insights are in the hands of the folks at your firm that are going to be having direct interactions with your customers. So how do I get the right information about a customer to be able to create a very contextually rich experience that suits just them? The third characteristic of a customer-obsessed firm is that they are fast. They are not perfect. Now this is the one that generally I feel like gives marketers a stomach ache because nobody wants to be the marketer that rolled out something before it was fully baked. And so what I will say here is that this is not an excuse to be irresponsible. This is a call to remember that your customer has extremely high expectations and that because of technology, they're actually making decisions about the brands that they're going to prefer very, very quickly. And if you are working to perfect something over the course of 6 months or 9 months as you work through every possible thing that you want to smooth out, that is not fast enough to stay in front of your entitled customer. So while this is not a call to be irresponsible, this is a call to be iterative and to think about how you can develop a campaign or a product in an iterative way by rolling something out, seeing how your customers respond, and then making an adjustment. The fourth characteristic of a customer-obsessed firm is that they are connected, they are not siloed. And this is certainly an organizational challenge. How do we break down the barriers between groups within the company that are all trying to service the customer? But this is also about communication and collaboration and working in a way so that information that will help you be customer-led is communicated and processes to connect with customers are seamless. So this idea of customer obsession is a thorny one because it is not just about creating good customer-centric marketing programs. This is about being customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected everywhere across your firm. Every decision that you make, every person that you hire, every decision that you're thinking about as it comes to expanding the business and entering new markets. And for many companies, this is a very difficult notion to think about starting. You might be able to think about yourselves being customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected in one initiative or maybe in one part of the business, but how can you begin to do this everywhere? And if you remember the theme that I mentioned just a moment ago, that email marketing can be your wedge into customer obsession, I want to offer you a simple and familiar way to begin working toward customer obsession. So if this feels very daunting, it feels like it's a hard thing to think about how you might initiate, start thinking about email as a tried and true set of capabilities that can help you gradually become customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected. And you might already be thinking about why email. Of all of the tools available, of all of the digital competencies that you might have underway at the firm, why is email the place to begin? And I've just come up with 5 different things that I think really make email a very comfortable way to begin with customer obsession. It's because it's already ingrained at most of your firms. 98% of enterprise marketers are already using email. It is a familiar vehicle that you've been using not just for a few years, but in most cases for more than a decade. Email also tends to be very inexpensive, and I don't want to discredit the value of email by talking about its cost effectiveness. I'll simply point out that email can be a place where you can try a lot of things without incurring a huge financial risk. Email is also very intimate. You think about what it means to, as a brand, have your brand move into a customer's inbox. It's not about having a billboard on the side of the road, which is potentially miles away from your user. This is about getting your brand into my inbox, into my smartphone, which is a very intimate connection with me and very personal. Email is also very adjustable. It's something that you can in fact test in a very simple way, and many of the capabilities that Persado offers allow for an extremely dynamic way to adjust the language and the content of your messages as you learn more about what your customers want. And then of course email is addressable. This ties into that intimacy notion. You can determine precisely who should receive certain messages and the specific notion of what those communications should include. But in order to think about email as your wedge into customer obsession, I want you to think differently about your program than you have been. I want you in fact to hack your email program. Think about, what if you were starting from scratch and you were not thinking about what are all of the current barriers around what email can do. What are the current budget limitations about my program? What are the current dashboards that I'm supposed to populate with clicks and opens? Think instead about, if you were starting from a completely new greenfield, what would you use email to accomplish? And I'm going to suggest here a few to-dos, a few ways to start thinking about hacking your email program. And then I'm going to pass the conversation over to Kat, who's going to continue and talk a little bit about some of the work that Persado is doing with other companies like yours to help them think about different opportunities with their email programs. So my to-do number one is to think about email as more than just an ad medium. So for almost 20 years, email has played a mostly promotional role. And there is a lot of value in that, and there are a lot of ways to improve the promotional aspect of email. I want you to think about, what if email did more for you than just sending out promotions? What if you used email as a way to connect a customer across all of the different touch points that they might use when they engage with your brand? This is an example from American Express, where they actually can identify a user by my registered email address. They can see an itinerary for international travel that comes from a credit card purchase. So Amex is looking at my credit card statement. They see that I have an upcoming trip to Paris in January. And they can email me, because they are using my email address to identify me as the same customer, and tell me that they see I'm going to Paris. They've already put a travel notification on my account, and there's no need for me to follow up with them. They're going to keep an eye on my charges and make sure that nothing strange happens while I'm overseas. So in this case, email isn't about promoting use of the Amex card or pitching something. It's about connecting with me in a deeper brand engagement to preempt a customer service concern when I'm traveling overseas using my Amex card. What if email could be used as a customer profile builder? This is an example from a Dutch hotel reseller called Hotel Specials, where they're actually using email to promote bookings, but they're also using email to create rich customer profiles that then they use to improve the content of their emails and also to improve the content of some of their other marketing messages. So they actually spent 6 weeks collecting email feedback and information about how people were responding to the regular weekly messages that they sent, and then use that information to create more curated messages after the 6-week test period. And then how about the idea of using email as a lab environment? I love this example from eBay because it speaks to the value of email as a very low-cost marketing tool. They actually use their emails to also promote product, but to connect with their user and identify how certain products perform together. So they're sort of testing out the merchandising of their product images, of their placement, of how different products can be positioned together to then influence their overall web design and their Pinterest pages, which are much, much more complicated to redesign. So email provides a test bed for them to figure out what kinds of design, features, and product assortment should they be positioning on their web and Pinterest pages. So when you hack your email program, first think about email as more than just an ad vehicle. Then think about how email can be a complete digital experience. This is the idea of considering how email can be more than just a newsletter with several blue links. It's fascinating to me that as digital has evolved, our expectations for things like mobile apps and web pages have gotten more sophisticated. We expect interfaces that can be dragged and resized and remember where we left off when we were there in the app previously. But email continues to still be mostly a very link-based set of interactivity. So think instead about how you can enhance the experience of the email by creating more interactive content. This is an example from Hotel Tonight, where they actually are blending their customer information, primarily location and the types of hotel properties you've indicated an interest in, with their available inventory information from their booking system. And they create content in the email that is positioning, when I am within a certain geography, here are all of the available hotel rooms at their current inventory level and their current available price. So it's a very dynamic experience based specifically on an individual user at the time of message open. But it's not just content that can be customized. How about the creation of more interactive templates? This is an example from Mizuno that they developed in concert with an agency called Brightwave. In this template, a user can actually interact with the baseball glove to design the glove that's custom for them. So you can change the size, you can change the color of the different leathers, you can put different leathers in different places of the glove, and then you can save it to your own wish list. You can email it off to somebody that you are hoping will get you this gift for Christmas. And the whole thing is done within the body of the email without having to click away and move to a landing page. And then here's another simple example of interactivity within the email. This is an example of a retailer that's actually including a shopping cart embedded directly within the email. This is enabled through a capability built by Rebel Mail, where there is no chance that a user will flake out or decide not to buy when they have to click through the email and get to a landing page, because the shopping cart and the purchase functionality is built right into the email. And then the final notion here as you think about creating more rich digital experiences is to think about customizing the experience that a customer might have with your brand using email. So we talked about more enhanced content. We talked about more enhanced templates. This is about using email to create enhanced experiences. This is just a quick example from Dunkin' Donuts. Hilton does something very similar, where every individual loyalty club member who's part of the Dunkin' Donuts Perks program actually receives a year in review email from Dunkin' Donuts that includes all of their personal history, everything about the number of times I've visited Dunkin' Donuts, the number of points that I've used, the number of points I've redeemed, the numbers of cups of coffee that I've had. All of this is a custom element that's based on my particular history with the brand. Now outside of just this loyalty program information, this is an example where Wayfair is actually using email to create an augmented reality experience of some of the furniture that they sell. So in this case, if you open a Wayfair email on your phone, you can actually see the email which is pitching this sofa. I can take a look at this sofa and through my mobile phone capability, view how that sofa will look in my living room. So this is taking email and using it to extend the experience that a customer can have with the Wayfair brand, and also encouraging me to purchase by helping me get a better vision of what that's going to look like in my house. Now my last point for you here is outside of just the design and functionality of the email, which is about thinking differently about your email team. And you know this already, that for many organizations the email team is staffed with very junior folks who are maybe just getting started with their marketing career. And I want to encourage you to create the email function as one that will nurture the curiosity and sustain talent over time. We know from our research that more tenured email teams actually tend to create more sophisticated email programs. So a few quick examples of some ways to do that. PicMonkey, which is a photo sharing site, actually deliberately seats its employees in a mixed function arrangement so that nobody from the same team is sitting next to each other. They believe that by listening to other people's conversations, you might learn things about how the way the rest of the business works. And they find that that actually encourages longevity, that people feel their curiosity is met, that they're learning things that help them do their job in a fresh and sustainable way. Starbucks does time-limited assignments. These are job rotations where you earn your way into a chance to work in a different team. And this also encourages longevity and helps to create a richness and a sophistication when you come back to your home job because you have such a good breadth of experience working with other teams. And then MasterCard and Mars have a reverse mentoring program, meaning that their senior-most folks are actually mentored by junior members of staff to help them stay up on what new generations care about and to keep them up on emerging technologies. So I'm going to close off my portion of the conversation here with one more stat for you. So we know from our business technographics data that just 26% of global business executives believe that their businesses will be better in 5 years. So stated differently, this means that 74% of business executives don't expect their businesses to perform any better if they don't make a change to what they're doing today. So I want to encourage you to think differently. Work differently. Think about how you can use email, which is a familiar tool, to help do different things within your marketing organization and within the way that you are understanding your customers. And this might mean thinking about some technologies that are outside of the traditional email service provider that maybe you already have a relationship with. I did some research earlier this summer around the breadth of technologies that are available today in the email space to provide more point solutions beyond just deployment. This is a very small figure from that research, but it looks at some of the functionality associated with these different kinds of companies. So as you're thinking about becoming customer obsessed and how you can work differently in order to put the customer at the center of your entire operation, I would encourage you to start with email marketing. It can give you a terrific low-risk way to innovate on behalf of your customers. And with that, I'm going to end my portion of the program, pass the conversation over to Kat, and I look forward to answering your questions at the end of our discussion. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Shar. I appreciate that. So I'm Kat Dessenon. I'm the Vice President of Campaign Management at Persado, and I'll talk a little bit today about some things that I've seen in my inbox recently, and a lot of it really echoes some of the things that Shar's pointed out. And I'll give you my perspective on these trends from as someone who works at Persado. So people are very interested in themselves. So I agree 100% that businesses need to make sure they're really customer-centric. People want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to be known by people around them, and specifically more and more the brands that are marketing towards them. So how can marketers tap into these desires using email? There are some really obvious answers, like using customer purchasing habits to target them with more relevant products, or using time of day testing. But what can marketers do to make that connection a little bit deeper and go further and really tap into consumer psychology using marketing technology? So I'll go over 3 examples today. The first is customer feedback. How can you act on someone's desire to be heard? Why don't you ask them? I'll go over some examples that I've seen and provide some recommendations based on experiments we've run at Persado. In the next section, I'll talk about some ways you can enhance your customers' experience with their email and provide them with valuable information that's both timely and relevant to them. And finally, in truly knowing someone, you have the power to reveal things about them they don't even realize about themselves. So I'll show you a few examples of the way marketers can use the data that they're gathering about their audiences to do more than just sell something. So first, customer feedback. If there's one thing that people give very freely, it's their opinion on things. So we all know if customers have a bad experience with a brand, they're more likely to tell 10 different people, versus if they have a good experience with a brand, you're lucky if they tell one. Customer loyalty and engagement should be a top concern for any marketer, for a lot of the reasons that Shar pointed out earlier. So how can you engage with your audience in a more systematic way than just reading comments on Facebook or answering complaint emails? And how do you create a more meaningful connection to your audience to understand what they really want, what they really desire, and what they really want to tell you? Why don't you ask them directly? So what's the best way of getting feedback from customers? I'm sure we've all seen these pop-ups on websites asking for a minute or 2 of your time. These surveys can be kind of distracting to your customers and might not target exactly the right customers that you want to find out information about. I find these experiences especially distracting when they're in the middle of a transaction I'm trying to complete. So I engaged with these the first few times I've seen them, but now I find them really annoying. So email is a much better channel to find out information from your customers. So these are some examples of recent emails that I've gotten within the past few months from different brands I've interacted with or purchased something from. Email is really personal, and customers can answer on their own time rather than being disrupted in a website experience. Personally, I love taking these surveys and quizzes and providing feedback to brands that I care about to share my experiences. At Persado, we've seen an average of 21% open rates and about 4.5% click rates for the survey and product feedback emails we worked on, which is quite a bit higher than the average promotional email engagement rates. So it's great that brands are doing this, but what could they be doing to make these emails even better? At Persado, we know that words matter. Specifically, emotions play a huge part in getting people to respond. On average, for general promotional emails, emotions drive 60% of response. This means the difference between using a phrase that is effective and resonates with your customer compared to one that doesn't can be huge. We've seen differences in message performance of upwards of 400%. For survey and product review email subject lines, emotional contribution is even greater than for regular promotional emails. So it's over 80%. It contributes over 80% to the response rate compared to other elements tested, like the descriptive elements or formatting elements. This means it's really important to use the right emotional concepts. We have some examples here of the top performing emotional categories for survey emails that we've experimented on, and some examples of language that we found that works well. So rather than just asking your customer, how did you like your product, you might want to lead with, thank you for shopping with us. The final thing to close the loop on customer feedback is actually telling your customers you've done something with the information that you've gathered. So here I have a couple of examples from a fitness studio I attended who rolled out a few different product package offerings and wanted even more feedback about how their customers liked them. And then I received a personalized response from my gym about some feedback that I provided to them, and they wanted to set up some time to speak with me. So this was a really kind of satisfying way of knowing that I was listened to and my feedback was being taken into consideration. So next, people really want to be understood. And as a marketer, how can you accomplish that through email? What can you do to make your email more usable and useful to your customers? So one thing I noticed is anytime it rains, I get an email from Seamless. Seamless knows that I'm living in New York and uses technology to identify that it's raining out. So maybe I don't want to leave my office and go pick up my lunch. They would rather someone deliver my lunch to me. So this is based on location, weather, and also gives me a little bit of a forecast right in my inbox. So I don't need to check a separate weather app. Seamless is telling me that it's going to rain today, so I hope I brought an umbrella. Another example is Sephora. They've always been on the cutting edge of marketing technology and implementing best practices, and I could probably do a whole other webinar just about them and their email program. So I do a lot of online shopping, like most people do, and one thing I really appreciate is Sephora's real-time shipping updates that are contained right within the email. So there's no need for me to click to the shipper website and try to figure out where exactly my package is. Sephora has bundled everything up and told me exactly where it is and when it estimates it's going to be delivered. So I really appreciate that they've saved me a little bit of time, they've saved me some clicks, and made this email more useful for me. Next, something I've seen in my Gmail on my mobile phone is Google curating some top picks of brands that I interact with more frequently. So by looking at the emails that I've opened up most often from different senders, Gmail shows them to me and saves me a few clicks of looking in my promotions inbox because maybe there's nothing that's interesting to me there today. But if there is, if I want to see something from Bath & Body Works, if I want to check out the promotional email, Gmail is presenting that to me. The other thing that I noticed on Google's blog is that they're rolling out some new features for marketers to tag and annotate their emails based on the promotions that they're offering. So rather than just utilizing a subject line, marketers now can add a small picture preview, the discount, any promo codes, and the expiration date of that particular email and give their consumers kind of a shortcut of what's in that email. So at Persado, we know that for visual ads like display banners and Facebook images are really important. I think it would be really critical to start testing some of the images in these emails to see if there's one that's more effective than another one. I'm really interested in seeing more data around how effective this annotation is and if it influences any of my purchasing behavior. So finally, what can you do to build a connection with your audience? How can you use the information you're gathering about your customers to surprise and delight them rather than just sell them something? So these are some examples that are similar to what Shard pointed out. So to make a one-on-one connection with your audience, you want to go beyond the segment. At Persado, we have some technology that does allow us to communicate one-on-one directly with the end users and really tailor marketing messages to them and how they respond to different emotions. But what Spotify has done and others like YouTube and Facebook, they've sent out a year-end wrap-up. So they've not only told me all sorts of data points about what I've listened to, how much I've listened, who I've listened to most, they've used that data and actually created customized playlists. So things that I've listened to a lot in one playlist, and then other suggestions of playlists from artists I might not have engaged with yet. So the other really interesting thing, and thank you for Dan for the screen cap here, is this type of an email can actually go cross-channel. So people are tweeting about this, people are sharing this on Facebook. So even something as inexpensive as an email can go viral, and it shows that the content of your email is powerful enough to cross over into these other channels and engage an even wider audience than just your subscribers. The other two things that I've seen are kind of months in review rather than just year in review. So every month I get an email from Lyft. They tell me how many times I've ridden with them, how often I ride, and what I think is really interesting is they've started gamifying the usage of their app. So I get different badges for taking rides in different cities and taking rides on the weekend versus during the week. And so it reminds me a little bit of Foursquare, who had used to do this as well. Also, Google, the all-knowing Google, also sends me a month in review about where I've been. So while it verges on a little bit creepy that it tracks my location everywhere, I've actually used this feature to go back and figure out the name of a restaurant I visited and couldn't remember the name of. So, it's a little borderline, but I do think that this information is really useful, and is another way that you can make the data that you're gathering about your customers work for them and not in a way to just sell them something. So those are my suggestions about how you can use customer data and make it into something a little more personal for them. So thanks a lot for listening, and remember to ask your customers for feedback using the most effective language, send them relevant information, and be sure to share their data back to them in creative and unique ways.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shar and Kat. Those were terrific presentations and a lot to think about. We're going to move over to the Q&A session now, and I want to remind people on the webinar live that if you'd like to ask a question, you can use the participant feedback box, which I believe is in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Please send something out, and we'll be sure to hit your question. So we do have some questions that have come in. I want to start with you, Shar. Can you talk about how email is being used in the overall marketing mix, both from a budget perspective and a percentage of communications perspective?
Sure. So good timing for this question, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we're just finishing up our forecast of overall spend going into digital marketing. So for this year's forecast, we're looking at email marketing, but we're also looking at social media, search marketing, display advertising, and online video. So looking at how is the digital mix being distributed against those media, and also what is the relative share that each medium is picking up. And I would say the thing to note is that email is certainly the least expensive of all of the things that we're sizing. So from an overall share, it has a tiny little sliver of the overall pie, but it's actually continuing to grow at about an 8% compound annual growth rate between now and 2023. So it's a significant growth rate considering the maturity of the medium and also the cost effectiveness of the medium. It doesn't cost very much to run a good email program. And what we're seeing in terms of what's driving that growth is not quantity of messages. So historically, what created growth in email marketing was spend on volume. The more you spent, the more you sent, the more you were spending. What's happening now is companies are actually spending on making their messages smarter. So they're spending to send fewer emails that are more customized to individual users, and they might be sending in more instances. So instead of sending one blast that goes out to everybody on my list once a week, I'm sending 1,000 different emails a week that are being sent at different times and with different purposes specific to accomplish my goal and my customer goals. Now, if we just look at this compared to other media in the mix, the lion's share of the digital spend is still going to search marketing. This is because of just the behavioral targeting that it helps with. It's easy to find a customer who is in market when they are conducting a search. They're sort of raising their hand that they're in market. But search is gradually losing share to paid social media, which can be purchased in the same way based on targeted behaviors, and also to online video, which is showing a real increase in utilization because it works for both the small advertiser who maybe could never afford a TV ad, and also really large brand advertisers who didn't want to do a lot of digital marketing before because they felt like it wasn't great for branding. So online video is taking a bit of share as well. To the question specifically about percentage of communication, so we've not looked at it as of all of the advertising promotions that a customer receives, what percent of those are email. What I think is maybe the more interesting insight is that notion that there is a shift from quantity to quality reflected in the email spend, and it's not a representation of marketers sending more mail. It's a representation of spending to improve the sophistication, and in fact sending fewer mail that are more customized to individuals' needs.
Great, thank you, Shar. We now have a question for Kat. Kat, you showed some examples of email subject line optimization. What about the body of an email and the resulting landing pages?
Sure. That's a great question, Dan. We definitely want to go beyond testing in just the subject line, and you also want to think about testing within your email body. So although for subject lines we saw that emotions can range, the contribution of emotions can range from 60 to 80% depending on the type of email. In the email body, you really want to focus on the images you're using and also your call to action, which we know drives quite a lot of the response. So there can be a huge difference between testing something like shop now and view more. So we really encourage marketers to go ahead and test even some more kind of out there calls to action like I want that or looks good, so to just understand what's most effective for their audience. Not to say that emotions don't play a part in email bodies, because they definitely do, and it's definitely important to test different emotional concepts and find out which ones are most relevant to your audiences. And also continue on into the landing page, as you mentioned, to kind of continue that emotional journey that the customer is on. We've seen, again, a lot of contribution from calls to action on landing pages. So we know that it's an important area to figure out the best language for.
Great, thank you. So back to you, Shar. You gave some great B2C or business to consumer examples in your presentation. Can you also talk a little bit about B2B and whether the same rules apply?
Yeah, so one of the other interesting findings that we are uncovering as we do this forecast is that there is an incoming population of marketers that historically hasn't been very aggressive with email, and this is mostly from industries that don't have a lot of direct-to-customer relationships. So B2B is one of the places where we see a lot of new utilization of email. And this matters because our forecast looks at a 5-year trajectory of spend, and that growth can come from either incumbent marketers spending more, or new marketers that historically haven't been counted in the overall pie starting to spend more in the medium. So we know, for example, that about 62% of B2B marketers are planning to implement or expand their email programs in 2018 and 2019. So this is a very significant growth from where B2B companies were in the past. And I think all of these same rules that we've been discussing continue to apply. So I think we'll expect B2B companies to go through a sort of similar evolution that consumer firms have, where they got to get good at the basic nuts and bolts. They have to start using email in a sort of newsletter kind of context to create relationships and build their list with their customers. And then they'll get to the place where they can think about what else email could do. From a brand building or a product demonstration, you think about the complexity of many business purchases. Couldn't email be a great way to help explain or provide a tutorial that would be a very interactive format for somebody to get familiar with a product before they buy or even in a post-sales experience? So I anticipate a lot more on the B2B email side beyond what we've seen historically around just kind of lead generation efforts. I think we're going to start see improved sophistication around email for very complicated types of product purchases.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of B2B marketing is taking a page out of B2C marketing these days, and so it would stand to reason then that email would become a part of that marketing mix in a different way. So we have one more question, and I'm going to first pitch it to you, Shar, but I'm also interested in Kat's opinion on this. So you showed some data on consumer attitudes towards email. And the question is, do you know if those attitudes match up to actual metrics like open rate and click-through rate? In other words, is what people are saying and what people are doing the same?
So I don't know. Forrester actually can't track actual opens and clicks. That tends to be something that email service providers keep record of, and we can't track because we're not actually sending the mail. So what we know is reported data back from individuals who indicate their response to a bunch of survey questions. So there is always an inherent survey bias in a survey methodology, which is it's based on how people recall and what they do. My hypothesis, because I've watched this data since 2004, my hypothesis is in two places. One is that consumers have actually gotten better. I'll say people because our data is consumer, but it's about individuals who receive emails in any inbox, so it could be their business emails as well. People have gotten better at managing their own email subscriptions, so their attitudes have improved a bit as they just are smarter about what they're signing up for, how they want to manage their inbox in a way that kind of files the critical messages in certain places. And then marketers are getting better as well at creating more customized messages, and we see that through this shift from a quantity to a quality-based set of budgeting, that we're sending fewer mail to try to break through and get customers what they want. But I've not looked at if this means an improve in click-through. And I'll tell you the other thought I have is I'm not a huge fan of the blanket benchmark as a performance indicator. I think it's much more important to look at how are your mails in their overall performance, how are they changing over time, and how are they changing over time by customer. So whatever your benchmark is for a particular type of customer, and if you find that that is languishing or changing, what have you done that you might want to remedy, rather than just trying to create some sort of benchmark of another company's program that might not have anything to do with you or your customers.
Excellent. And Kat, from all of your data analysis at Persado, are you seeing any material changes to the metrics like open rate and click-through rate? And if so, what might be the source of those changes?
Sure. Yeah, that is something that we look at Persado since we are all about the response rates to emails. So we have seen a slight decrease in open rate and decrease in click rate, while conversion rate has actually stayed pretty steady. So I think the reason that email click rates over time have gone down slightly is kind of to Shar's point, people are really better managing their email and just being potentially more selective about what they're engaging with. They clearly still want to purchase things, but they're just being a little bit kind of pickier about what they're engaging with, and probably likely due to the increased volume of email everyone gets. So again, they'll still want to purchase something, but they're not going to open every single email from all of their different retailers, as they may have 10 years ago when they weren't so bombarded by marketing content. So clearly, consumers still want to purchase. There's still a lot of demand for the online marketplace, but they're just being a bit more selective.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps up our webinar, What's Next for Email Marketing in 2019. I really want to thank Shar from Forrester and Kat from Persado for joining us. If you're interested in learning more about either organization, you can go to www.persado.com or www.forrester.com to learn more about the respective organizations. Also, this recording will be available on the Persado website later today. Thanks again for attending What's Next for Email Marketing in 2019. Have a great rest of the week.